Hey, what's up everyone? My name is Trent. Welcome to Rams Talk. Finally getting to the 2019 NFL Draft recap for the Rams. I did a couple live streams during the draft night, day one, day three, but nothing that really kind of wrapped it all up with a little context and some analysis on my thoughts. So here you go. I've gained some subscribers in the last week and a half, so everyone who just joined, thanks for hopping on board. Glad to have you. For all of the legacy subscribers who join the live streams and have just been there in the comment sections, thanks so much for just being a part of Rams Talk. To shout out to Downtown Rams. Those guys have compiled a lot of data that really helped me prepare for the draft. So shout out to that. You can also find me on Twitter at Real LA Rams Talk. So let's just get right into this. Just overall, I think the Rams did a phenomenal job. I'm not going to give a letter grade to this. I'm just going to say that I think that the Rams now are in a position where they don't have holes to fill, so to speak. They basically, it's like, this is what all good franchises do. They establish an identity. They have a lot of talent, and then they know where they have needs. Not so much like full-on gaps, but where they have needs and how to, I guess, reinforce the framework of the team. And that's really what they did. They drafted. There was a plan and a vision for every single player that they drafted. And all the picks were intentional. The Rams really take into account, after watching some of their scouts talk about the process, but what they really take into account is how those players fit into the building as Rams, and then how they fit into the roster. So it's a combination. And Brad Holmes, the director of college scouting, even said he identified the type of players that they go after are passionate players, good teammates, like, you know, guys who build a connected team, smart players, instinctive players, and explosive players. I mean, that sounds pretty generic, but I think those are the pillars that, like, all of the guys that the Rams draft touch on. So they're not bringing in like character issue guys. They're bringing in football players and guys who love the game. So I'm just going to go over some like general themes that I heard McVay and Snead talk about after they kind of were breaking down the draft and why they made certain picks. And I think a lot of the times, a lot of people get hung up on the combine and the pro day and, you know, the 3-cone drill and the 40 time and the bench press. And they really disregard the actual football playing of that player and the tape and the years that the scouts actually sit there and watch these guys. And, you know, Taylor Rapp fell because of his 40 time. And so what McVay was quick to point out is that John Johnson and Cooper Kupp didn't have all of those like high-end measurables, but they were really good at football. I think at the end of the day, they just say, are you good at playing football? Or are you DK Metcalf and look like a crazy specimen? And DK Metcalf could be good at football, but I don't think he's as good at football as Cooper Kupp is. So I think that's really what they do. And they try and collect as much data and insight as possible on everyone. And the reason why they traded back is because they identified like the first 100 picks and those players. And there really isn't that much difference. Like Taylor Rapp and some of the guys that the Rams got, if you go back to mock drafts like before the combine, they're mocked in the first round or the second round. But there's so many guys in the top 100. And so what the Rams wanted to do is they said, hey, we don't have like a desperate need, but we want to get as many shots at the basket in the top 100 as possible. And it would benefit them in the short and the long term. And, you know, and I think another thing that kind of goes unnoticed is the Rams coaching staff ability to coach up the players, to develop players. So you don't have to take a guy who is like your 5-star guy and just know that he's already good. But you can get guys that, you know, hit all of the profiles that I mentioned and love football, are coachable, and you trust the coaches to get the most out of them. And that's the success That shows how successful teams are run and operated. So the Rams have the infrastructure from a player development and coaching standpoint, from a scouting standpoint, and from a schematic standpoint of like what McVay and Wade Phillips want to do with their team and the different dimensions and how they want to evolve. And so Sean McVay's scheme has evolved. Wade Phillips' scheme has evolved. And their needs and their wants are more specific now. So like you go back to when the Rams traded the RG3 pick and got all those players, is because they needed everything. It wasn't specific. It was like, we need a full new roster. Now they can kind of go in and pinpoint everything. So I got a new slide for everyone here. Hold on. There it is. So these are all the guys the Rams drafted. I don't have a slide for undrafted free agents, but these are all the guys the Rams got. So let's just start with Taylor Rapp. So Taylor Rapp is a guy, and I remember watching the Rose Bowl, and Taylor Rapp didn't play. He had a hip flexor problem. And that's all everyone could talk about during the Rose Bowl against Ohio State, Washington versus Ohio State, is like the game would be different if this impact player, and he was dressed, but he didn't go in, and like how he was a game changer. And I was like, that's weird. He's a safety. This isn't like their QB is out. Their safety is out, and that's a huge deal. So that just like, that's where I first started really thinking about Taylor Rapp. Now they're, the West Coast area scout, Vio Janella, said that essentially he started scouting Rapp after he won the Pac-12 Freshman of the Year. So in the Pac-12, he was the Freshman of the Year a couple years ago, and that's when he got on the Rams' radar and Vito's radar. And so basically when Les Snead and McVay said, who do you like in your area? He's like, my number one guy is Taylor Rapp. Now, what they like about him is he has unbelievable instincts, knife blitzer, short pace quickness in the box. He's learning behind Weddle and John Johnson, and those are three guys with a versatile skill set, which Taylor Rapp also has. He loves football, very instinctual, and his 40 time was down because he ran it kind of injured and had, like Les Snead said, if I was advising him, I probably would have told him not to run, but that affected his 40 time. And very rarely do you see safeties running like in a straight line 40, like a 40-yard dash. But he plays fast. He redirects. His redirection and reactionary skills are top notch. And he's like Cup in that way. And he can play safety or drop down in the linebacker spot for some nickel packages. So basically, he's great at blitzing, being in the box, playing in there. He only missed 2 tackles last year. 2 tackles. There is a safety that the Rams used to have last year that I don't know how many times I was like, man, this guy is not tackling. LaMarcus Joyner. Taylor Rapp was also the 38th rated prospect on Pro Football Focus's big board. So getting him at 61 is value. The Rams really got a lot of value in this draft. So I'm very happy with Taylor Rapp, and he serves a need because if Weddle gets injured, Taylor Rapp is there. You put him in nickel packages, he's there. Eric Weddle retires after the season, Taylor Rapp is there. So that was a big time need. And instead of having 3 players, if the Rams hadn't traded back or done anything, they still might have taken Taylor Rapp at 31, but then they would only have 2 more picks. But instead of that, they picked up an extra player in that top 100. So now they have 4 guys instead of 3, and that's because of all their wheeling and dealing. And the second guy they got in round 3 was Darrell Henderson out of Memphis. Darrell Henderson out of Memphis, I know this, like initially this brought up a lot of like what's going on with Todd Gurley's knee. I think this makes it too dark, actually. Yeah, there you go, that's better. I think the problem with Todd Gurley's knee, or like drafting a running back, is like, oh crap, that means that they really are freaking out about Todd Gurley's knee. Now, the more you hear them talk, and that could be true, but I think after listening to them talk and hearing them explain things, and like I mentioned before, is Sean McVay's scheme is ever evolving. And going back to when they signed Lance Dunbar 2 years ago, they wanted to change a pace back. Ever since McVay got there, they wanted to change a pace back, and they never had one. And so it wasn't necessarily an issue with Todd Gurley. It was just adding another element or a wrinkle to the offense. Like, why would Sean McVay just sit there and be like, everything we did last year is everything we're going to do next year? We're going to always be 11 personnel. We're always going to have the same things going on. And we're only just going to have Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley missed the Chiefs game. He missed 2 games in the final, in the last 2 games of the year. They didn't really need him anyways against the Niners and the Cards. But, Todd Gurley, let's say his knee was not an issue last year. You'd still need a backup for Todd Gurley. You still, like, the more depth you can have, the better. The more versatility you can have in your backfield, the better. Look at the Patriots with Sony Michel and Rex Burkhead and James White. They've actually, Snead compared the usage of Darrell Henderson to James White. So I think he didn't drop a pass last year when targeted. Darrell Henderson did. Now, his running style at Memphis matches what the Rams do. He's an outside zone runner. The Rams run outside zone with Todd Gurley. That's their style. So that is a fit. They're getting a person for a fit. Also, kind of crazy, he led the college football in rephrase. He averaged for his career at Memphis 8.22 yards per carry. That's crazy. Not just for his season, for his career, he averaged over 8 yards per carry. That is the best mark ever in the history of the NCAA. Now, granted, he's playing at Memphis against inferior opponents in college, but still, no one has ever done that before. Last year, he averaged 8.9 yards per carry and 6.2 yards after contact. So he's explosive. Like I said, didn't drop a pass. He's a change of pace back. They can use him in any kind of formation. He can play detached in the backfield, taking an offset gun run, or lining up in the dot. Those are Sean McVay's words exactly. He's a home run hitter, and his NFL comparison is Philip Lindsay. I was going to say Lindsey Hunter, like the NBA player that was on the Pistons. Also, it can really help Sean McVay activate and provide some different personnel groupings. So they don't always want to ask the receivers to play in every snap of every game over 16 seasons in 11 personnel. They want to split them out, run some routes like James White. So this just provides different dynamics for the offense and their formations, and just gives that real change of pace back. I mean, no one in New Orleans had a problem with there being Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. Like, it was like, oh gosh, that must say that, that must tell us that Alvin Kamara's not healthy or Ingram's not healthy. That was just like, man, we got 2 awesome running backs that do different things, and it provides different elements. So, running back is the most volatile position in the NFL, and why wouldn't you want to be prepared? So, like, when Todd Gurley went down against the Chiefs, it's like, okay, I believe in Malcolm Brown, but is it just Malcolm Brown as your running back? No. So you want to have options. One of the picks I really, really loved was David Long out of Michigan. I mentioned him. He was at the Senior Bowl. They met with him, but actually Les Snead met him back when he was still in high school. So Les Snead, when the Rams relocated to LA, enrolled his son at Loyola High School, and when he was there, like, an assistant principal brought in David Long and said, hey, this guy's like our best player. He's enrolling at Michigan. And he shook hands, and Les Snead's like, oh, you're going to have a great time there learning under Jim Harbaugh. So he met David Long like years ago, before when he was still in high school. Now, he was 33rd on Pro Football Focus's big board, and he's arguably the best man coverage corner in the draft. And he fell a bit because of his measurables, but he gave up, in his entire college career, on 595 coverage snaps, he gave up only 18 catches. The guys he was guarding only had 18 catches. And I want to say like only 1 touchdown in his entire college career in the Big Ten. And of those 18 catches, only 3 resulted in first downs and just 1 a touchdown. And he cancels routes out. So like a receiver will be running, go to break into his route, but David Long is there and kind of like shakes the receiver to a different place. And he was first team All Big Ten. Like I said, he's a man coverage guy. And he's there when Talib leaves, and or if there's an injury this year, and or playing nickel coverage. So like after this draft, going into this season, the Rams secondary is stacked. You've got Talib, you've got Peters, you've got Long, you've got Nickel Roby-Coleman, you've got Weddle, John Johnson, Taylor Rapp. I mean, I'm not even talking about some of those other like fringe guys, but like that's insane. So I mean, they're also planning for the future, but those guys will all get reps this year. Now, also another pick in the third round was Bobby Evans out of Oklahoma, a tackle. He was the left tackle out of Oklahoma. He was a second team All Big 12 last year. He started all 40 games that he could play in college, and he was the right tackle 2 years ago for when Baker Mayfield was the QB at Oklahoma, and he was the left tackle for Kyler Murray. So he's had experience blocking for the last two Heisman Trophy winners. So that's pretty good. Like, you know, being a top player on a top team in college doesn't always translate to the NFL, but you know, when you're used to blocking for premier quarterbacks and being in a premier offense, that does help. Now he basically, here's some stats for you. He allowed just 20 pressures in 441 pass blocking snaps last year, and he earned a 78.2 pass blocking grade playing left tackle, and a 76.8 and 86.2 overall grades playing right tackle in 2016 and 2017. And he can play both right and left. Now, what Cromer talked about, not just with him, but with David Edwards, the guy they drafted out of Wisconsin later, the thing about both of those guys and what his philosophy is as an offensive line coach in the run game is, if you come in to play tackle or guard, if that was your position in college and you played on one side, when you get to Cromer, you're going to end up learning tackle and guard on both sides. You can play 4 positions. And that's what we're seeing already with Joe Noteboom. Noteboom was a left tackle in college, but he's going to slot in at guard for the Rams next year. So, you know, if they draft a guard or a tackle, you're playing guard and or tackle left and right sides. So the thing with him, with the Evans, the thing with Edwards from Wisconsin, those guys will come in and provide depth at the tackle and guard positions for this year and potentially start at one of those positions the following year. Whereas Austin Blythe and Brian Allen, Austin Blythe used to be center, his experience at center, so he and Brian Allen, there's depth there. So if something happens to Allen or he's not cutting it, you can slide Blythe over, then you can pop in Evans or Edwards at guard. So there's just a lot of flexibility and depth on the O-line, and that's really their way of thinking with Bobby Evans. I'm like, for O-line, I don't really view it as like they went out and got these great physical specimens and top graded guys. They went out and got guys that can get coached up and play anywhere on the line, and that's really what they need at this point. For this year, they don't have any glaring holes. Round 4, one of my favorite picks, Greg Gaines out of Washington. I thought they'd be going D-line like right off the bat. They addressed that in the 4th round, pick 134, and that guy's the nose tackle that's going to replace Ndamukong Suh, or replace that position for Ndamukong Suh, and he'll play that in the base defense. Now, he really shined in the Senior Bowl, because in the Senior Bowl, what they also do is they scout guys. There are a day or two there where they run a lot of one-on-ones. So they'll do the defensive line versus the offensive line that are on the same team and just those drills. So he was going up against Bradbury, I want to say like McCoy, and like some of the top centers and offensive linemen in the draft, and he was really wrecking shop. And he's another guy, doesn't have the great measurables. They say he has short arms, and it's like, okay, but did you watch the football tape? Did you watch what he did at Washington? They said he got the job done in Washington as a top-end defensive interior for the Huskies. He was one of the best run defenders in college football, but also had some pass rushing chops. And he had the third best win rate among interior players in the one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl. He ranked fourth among interior defenders in this year's draft class with a pressure rate of 12.2, tied with Jerry Tillery. He was also the 2018 Morris Trophy winner. And what the Morris Trophy is in the Pac-12 is that so in this case it would be the offensive linemen of all the other teams in the Pac-12 voted of who they felt the best defensive lineman was that they faced, and it was Greg Gaines. The offensive lineman who actually faced him out of everyone in the Pac-12, they're like, yeah, Greg Gaines is a beast, and he's the best guy we faced this year. And he was, of course, first team all Pac-12. So I expect him to step right in and make an immediate impact and really help the run defense for the Rams next year. Now, going back to in round 5, they picked David Edwards out of Wisconsin. Really good at run blocking, not so great at pass blocking. But he started in college as a tight end and bulked up, put on like another 100 pounds to make it as a tackle. And he was 9th in the draft class in run blocking grade. And the thing is he was kind of injured in 2018. He had nagging injuries. So coaches for the Rams went back and looked at his 2017 tape. And so they dug deep, watched the tape, and he played very well against a lot of players in 2017 and really held his own against Chase Winovich for the Wolverines when they played. So, they take these things into account. It's not just like, oh, you had a down year, you're not that good. It's like, oh, you had a down year, you were injured. Let's look at the totality of your tape and see how you've played against top players. Round 7, they didn't have a 6th round pick. In round 7, they got Nick Scott out of Penn State. Now, he's a safety / special teamers and this special team guy. And this is a guy that was really, they asked John Fossil Bones, the special teams coach, who do you want? And he said, I want this guy. And basically, Bones watched every special teams play that Nick Scott made at Penn State. And it was one of his favorite special team players ever that he's ever scouted. And he was their number one priority because Bones made such a case. And like, it's crazy to think that, like, usually you take like a linebacker who like doubles as a special teams player, but to get a guy who's just like a special teams player, and also he was like a team captain, he was like the heart and soul of the Penn State defense, like especially in the locker room. And it just goes to show that when they draft for a need, it's like you forget about special teams unless it's a kicker or a punter. And to like basically say like, hey, we're really good, we feel good about our roster, but we can take this guy and take our special teams performance and coverage to another level. And that's great that the Rams are like thinking, so like they drafted him with intent, and that's awesome. I love seeing stuff like that. The last guy they drafted was Dakota Allen out of Texas Tech. Know him from Last Chance U with the burglary. He was dismissed from college and then brought back to the team by Cliff Kingsbury, the coach at that time. And he was mocked in a lot of drafts, like as a 4th or 5th rounder, had that incident not taken place and there wasn't like that character concern. But they talked to him at the combine. They really felt good about him. He can play special teams, so they really like him at inside linebacker. Now, a lot of people, myself included, like you think you know what the Rams want or need, and there's this perception going into the draft, and then they draft, and you go, wow, they were really focused on like these other things. So a lot of people thought, oh, they're going to go offensive line with their first pick or defensive line with their first pick, and they're like, no, we're going to like get really good value at safety and cornerback and running back. And then we're going to go offensive line. And we're not even going to we're going to wait till the 4th round to get a defensive line player. So it just kind of goes to show like what they're really thinking and how everything's playing out. Now, the last thing I want to mention is there are 3 undrafted free agents that they picked up that have a shot of making the squad. I mean, there's tons. They signed like 14 plus, but these are the top 3 I think can make it. Nasimbo Webster, a wide receiver out of Eastern Washington. That's where Cooper Kupp is from, and Samson Ebukam. So they have a familiarity with Samson Ebukam, or with Eastern Washington players. He had 11 touchdowns and 1,300 yards last year. Landis Durham, an edge player out of Texas A&M. Rams didn't even draft an edge player, so they feel pretty set at that position. And over the past 2 seasons, he racked up 21.5 tackles for a loss, 17.5 sacks, and 3 forced fumbles. Out of Texas A&M. And then Brandon Hittner, center out of Villanova. He was the 6th best center in the draft by NFL.com's rankings, and projected to have been, he should have been drafted. One guy I thought that they should have gotten was Tevon Coney out of Notre Dame, inside linebacker, but oh well. And then one last thing, you know how I mentioned before, like the Rams always want to meet with players, talk to them before they draft them. And sometimes it's not official. Like Les Snead, they did meet David Long officially, but Les Snead also met him like 3 years ago. Aaron Cromer's son, I want to say Zach Cromer, he is on the Rams staff, and he used to be on the staff at Oklahoma. So he knows and is familiar with the Oklahoma coaching staff and the scouts and Bobby Evans that used to be there. So a lot of times you have these relationships kind of outside the official realm of bringing someone in for a meeting or working them out or whatever, seeing them at the combine. Like you already kind of know that player and you're talking to people about that player. So sometimes maybe you don't talk to them because you just already know the deal. So yeah, that's it. I feel like the Rams did a great job. I'm really happy with these picks. I'm not too freaked out about Todd Gurley's knee, but in case it does blow up, we have Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown there. Our secondary set. So this is all good. This is great stuff. I want to really thank you for watching. This is a long edition. It's almost 27 minutes long. But if you're watching this and you're a Rams fan and you haven't subscribed, please do so. If you want to watch some of the footage from the draft, the live stream, watch it up here, some other draft videos. But I really appreciate everything, guys. Tell me what you think about the draft in the comments, and keep a lookout for some upcoming videos. So thanks so much, guys, and I'll talk to you later. Go Rams.